What are you doing August 27, 28, and 29 other than joining me and thousands of others at this year's Success Summit, the 21st year of doing it? And here's where it's all going to start. It's my prediction. I've only made 4 of them in 3 decades. My prediction is between now and the end of the year, all the way through 2027, there's going to be absolutely no change. Yes, inventory levels the same. Interest rates, if we are lucky, they'll be in the mid 6s. There's going to be no change except for the changes that you make. And if you're looking to get ahead of the curve, be a forward thinker, spend time with top agents and people that are aspiring to do even more. If you want to learn the very best listing attraction, AI tools, marketing tools, systems, and processes to build your business, and most importantly, get some time back, because this is the market for the unforeseen future that I encourage you to check out this year's Success Summit. Hey, welcome back to the podcast. If you could unpack one agent's journey on listing 122 properties in the first 6 months while navigating successfully buyer brokerage agreements at scale, what questions would you ask? Well, that's exactly what I'm going to do today on this show. So the gentleman that has made this happen, one of my personal coaching clients, a great friend, a legend, certainly in the industry. He's going to laugh when I say that. Tom Toole, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me on, Tom. And you're very kind, as always. I'm just trying to help people buy and sell real estate. So we're keeping it simple.
Yeah. And well, you're doing it at scale, buddy. So, hey, I thought it'd be interesting. We had a coaching session today and we were talking about year-to-date numbers. And I was like, wow, we have a podcast scheduled. We should talk about what we were discussing today in the coaching session. There's 2 routes we want to go. And I think the critical one right now is everybody needs more listings. I was sharing with you, as I've shared a few times on the show, and I'll share it again for my listener, from January until April, let's call it January to May 1st, 2024, I was looking at the tranches of agents and how many listings they had taken year to date. So again, just the first 4 months. So Tom, 1,111,000 agents in the first 4 months took 0 listings. 0. Now, as I mentioned to you, hey, if you and Bridget were both licensed, husband and wife team, all of the listings would go under one MLS ID. So I get that. Someone's going to say that's a BS number. Okay, so let's say between teams and husband and wives and all that, let's say it's 100,000. Let's say it's 111,000. We still had a million agents that didn't take a listing in the first 4 months. 327,900 agents listed between 1 and 4 for a total of 542,000 properties. 45,000 agents listed 5 to 10. That's a big number. And I admit, like, listen, 5 to 10 listings in the first 4 months of 2024. These are good agents. 45,000 of them listed between 5 and 10. 15,000 agents listed 11 to 20, 2,500 agents, 2,500 listed 21 to 30. That's really good. That's like 6-7 listings a month. And you got 900 agents that listed 31 to 44, and only 750 agents in the US in the first 4 months listed more than 45 properties. So Tom, first of all, before we jump into the sort of the weeds and the tactics of how you're doing it, when you hear all those numbers, what goes through your mind?
So the first thing that comes to mind is the crappy training around listings that exists in the industry.
Yeah.
Anyone that's a great listing agent, they kind of keep everything a secret. And you even see this happen on teams where the team leader does all the listing business and they don't really show anybody how to do this stuff. So you're asking us how we got to this number. A little over a year ago, we started. We always say we're a listing focused team, but you can say things and you got to do them. And the training can get a little, it's tough. There's some days when it's not going well. Listings are hard. It's the hardest skill in real estate. No question, in my view. So we have a listing conversion workshop, is what we call it. And everyone sets a goal. We have numbers we're trying to hit. We have plans that range from 90 days to 180 days for the full year. And then we talk about what's working and what's not working. And the people that are serious about it kept showing up. They kept doing the things. And then they ran into the challenges that I've run into as a listing agent, because I was selling 90 listings a year for over a decade just myself. And then we're able to coach them through it. And that's something you told me a long time ago was transfer of skills. And
yes.
Everyone thinks like the transfer of skills is like, oh, I'll just tell them everything I know. And I've been guilty of this where I kind of have like a brain dump and I explain everything in 10 minutes, which is a horrible idea.
Right.
I mean, people's heads are spinning, right? But that's what I did. And under the advice of our killer sales manager, Brian, and some other people, we slowed it down. We simplified things, and then we followed the data, and that helped us get there in terms of like, who are you targeting? What are you doing? Because you go to things like your Success Summit and you watch some webinars or whatever else, you hear one person doing one thing and you're like, that's what I'm going to do. But you want to play the numbers when it comes to listings. Right. And there's a lot of data around that that's going to tell you, success leaves clues. We know that. And it's going to tell you where to target and who to speak to. So the training component, first and foremost, you've got to realize it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. It takes years for someone to become a great listing agent. So it's not going to happen overnight. And you've got to have a real commitment to it on a regular basis.
So let's unpack, if we talked about the data side specifically, what are the data points that you're tracking? Actually, before I even get into that, let's back up. The 122 listings taken, what percentage of those listings did you go on and help secure and then hand off to somebody on your team versus one of your teammates listing that property?
It's around 34, 35%. I mean, I don't have the exact to the decimal point, but there's also a component of follow the leader. And I use the word leader very intentionally because, I'm still making hundreds of lead gen calls a week. I'm still talking to people that I've sold homes to. I'm still helping negotiate the listing terms. And what we found with this sort of setup where I'm going on these appointments because, Tom, I mean, you've practiced scripts. I've heard you do it. There's a big difference between hearing the script and then seeing it actually work in real life. And I don't care what anyone says. Our buddy Doug Edrington talks about like classroom practice performance. Well, the performance side, when you see it work and you're like, wow. And then you hear, oh, that script you taught me about the listings that you teach everybody here, it's the same thing that you did at the appointment. It gives people more confidence that it's actually going to work. And confidence is a big part of this. Like you got to have some swagger when you're walking into these houses.
Yes.
People don't want, what do you, you mentioned ER all the time, right? Like that, like energy sucking vampire. They want someone that feels confident that's going to go out and help them sell their home. So bringing people with me on these appointments, and it's not just one, I'll bring them on a couple and then I'm like, hey, I'm going to do this one. Then why don't you talk a little bit? And then the third or fourth one, once you feel comfortable, let's handle this together. And then when we can get to a point where it's almost like a 50-50 sort of presentation, I know like, hey, you're good to do these on your own. You don't need me anymore. I'll still bring in on stuff, but you're progressing and I'm seeing it. And that's also the inspection, which is a big part of accountability as well.
Right. So back on the 122, 35%-ish were just you. The balance were you and a teammate, whether you got the appointment, they generated the lead, you got the appointment, or they got the appointment. But then let's unpack. Let's assume the person listening right now is like, hey, I don't have a team. I would love to have someone like Tom Toole take me on a whole bunch of listing appointments. So let's walk them through the training elements, or as you called it, the data points that agent who really wants to improve. And I go back to these numbers, the person that, maybe in the first 4 months listed 11 houses, they're doing something really well, but they're missing something also that's going to stop them from, say, listing 50 or 60 houses. Like I believe the hard, back me up on this, the hardest listing is the first one, right? Maybe the first 3 or 4, but once you're like, okay, I said this, they said this, I showed them this, they said yes to it. We agreed on terms, we agreed on price, we agreed on fees. Now it's just, how do I replicate that over and over again and get better? So what are those data points that you're paying attention to with your team? And then let's talk about the training elements associated to it.
Yeah, for sure. So the first one is that roughly 65% of all sellers list because of proximity. So they got referred to somebody, they knew somebody, they had a connection to them. So there's this aversion sometimes that, hey, I don't want to call the people I know, I'm bothering them. Well, great. Then that's going to be that other 35% that lists with somebody else, or maybe lists with another friend or someone that's out there. So we've tracked, and we actually go over this data in this conversion workshop, where like, hey, where are you getting listings from? What's actually working? Because you can say you want to do expired listings. Like that might've been great in 2009 when there was a lot of stuff expiring.
Yeah.
But in 2024, there's not that many homes expiring, at least in the Northeast. Every market's going to be a little different.
Yep.
So Sphere is going to be a place, or connections, your network, your database, whatever you're going to call it. That's something we talk about all the time. That's where we've seen a lot of our agents have a lot of success when they're on their own. And we want them to be competent enough to go out and get it on their own, so they don't blow the appointment. The other data point we look at is that there was a study done by Zillow where it was less than 10% of sellers actually made the decision within 30 days to sell. That's not the norm. Usually it's between 2 to 4 months when they're considering all of this. And there's some sellers, I'm sure you know this, Tom, you nurture them for 12, 24, 36 months sometimes.
100%.
So you've got to understand that this is a long game. It's not going to happen overnight. And there's some ways to get some quick hits if you want to go after for sale by owners or expireds or those sort of things. But they've got a higher degree of difficulty and the competition is going to be higher. What we also know is that over 70% of consumers hire the first agent they meet with. So what I'm looking at is, okay, can we get in front of them? Is there any sort of motivation, which isn't really a data point, but you've got to understand really 3 things when it comes to listings. If you get the appointment, what's their motivation and what's their time frame? That's really what you need to know. And they have to have a place of where they're going to. They have to have a game plan, because if they don't, they're not going to sell.
Yep.
So once you understand those factors around qualifying, knowing that you've got a better shot to get in front of them and get it signed if you're the first person in, and that 2/3 of them, let's call it, roughly 65%, they're going to list because of proximity. All of a sudden, the roadmap is clear about what to do next.
So I'm a big fan of first principles, and I know you are too. And if you think from a first principle standpoint, what you're saying is, first, the person listening right now, basically your database is where you should be getting the vast majority of your listings, because people are going to list their property with the person that they already know, like, and trust. And we see this because it frustrates good agents every day. Why in the world did that agent get that listing when I am an infinitely better agent? So proximity, that's a first principle. Mm-hmm. The second one, and you and I would say it differently, but the way I interpret it is, the sales cycle is longer for sellers than it is for buyers. It's a longer sales cycle for a whole myriad of reasons everybody understands with today's economy and real estate and home prices and inflation and interest rates. But the other first principle that you and I talked about today on our coaching call was, how do we get more hand raisers? How do we get in front of more people that are thinking about it? Because if you're first, you got a 70% chance of getting the listing. So let's segue. How do you train and instill, so now the training is the person listening, Tom. You're training another agent somewhere around the world that's like, yes. So what have you found that works with working your database? What have you found that works with long-term nurture? And what have you found that works with just getting in front of them?
Yeah, those are all great questions. So in terms of your database, and I saw this, I think it was Chris Smith put this out, that clients don't come back to agents because they stayed in touch with them. They came back because they did a great job. So, but at the same time, you want to be in kind of the right place at the right time. It's uncanny how often that'll happen to somebody when they're in action. So to answer your question about how to work your database, I'm a big believer in the Ford script, right? Family, occupation, recreation, dreams. I never get to that one. That's a little weird.
Yeah.
I call people on their birthdays. I call them on their anniversary when they bought or sold their home.
Yep.
Calling around the holidays is a slam dunk because they're going to see a lot of people they don't normally see.
Yep.
We do client events. We try to do our client events around things we know people want to do anyway. So we're going to pay for it so they can do it for free, like going to a pumpkin patch or having Santa Claus photos. So we're constantly doing those things, and we send them 17 pieces of mail a year, and they get a weekly video email from our team. Right. So there's a constant marketing plan in place, and it's not just one thing. It's a whole ton of things. You told me a couple times, listings are like lasagna, where there's a lot of layers to it. So you're branding yourself as being that person out there. So that's how you work your database, because that human interaction, that can go a long way. Doesn't want to feel like it's all automated via email and that sort of stuff.
Love it.
So that's what I would start with on your database. And I would just come up with a KPI, right? A key performance indicator. I've got to talk to 5 people in our database a day. It's manageable. Those calls last longer. It's something I can do every single day. And it's not going to create a lot of listing appointments right away, but then all of a sudden you'll get stuff that comes out of the woodwork. So that would be how I'd market to the database.
Yep.
Anything you want to unpack there?
No, I think that's pretty complete. And it, you know, for my longtime listeners, that, you know, there's been so much discussion around this. Let's talk about the longer sales cycle. What are you finding that's working in terms of lead nurture? Is it, you know, solutions like Fellow, which I'm a big fan of, not an investor, but, you know, love Ryan and the crew. What other things should agents be thinking about? Just acknowledging longer sales cycles, and whoever stays on top of those people ultimately wins the opportunity.
So Fellow has been very eye-opening for us. We use it at a high level. And the first thing you'll notice with Fellow, it shows you the people that list that don't use you, and that'll really piss you off, and it'll cause you to take action. So that's a great feature, but it also lets you know what's kind of going on, where you're missing opportunities. And you can't expect anything that you don't inspect. So you can kind of see, all right, where did I go wrong on this? Where did we miss an opportunity? But Fellow is a long-term lead nurturer. They got a lot of email campaigns that go out, very effective. I'm a big fan of that. We've listed multiple properties from there, and now we drive traffic to our Fellow site to get home value information. So that can be pretty effective. I'm a big believer in like the simple e-alert of home sales activity in the neighborhood that says something like, Newport Beach sales activity for Tom and Kathy from the Tom Tool Sales Group at RE/MAX. And that's the email subject. And anytime there's something like your home that sells, you're finding out about it, whether it's, a couple times a month, once a month, whatever that is. It makes it look personalized. People care about property information. Everyone's always curious about real estate. They always want to know what's selling, even if they're not in the market.
Right.
So that can be a really effective thing that you can do pretty easily. Then there's like the call cadence. And this is where a lot of people get jammed up, where I don't want to feel like I'm bothering folks. I don't want to feel like I'm a pain in the butt. And usually that happens because you're not asking the right questions when you're talking to them.
Yep.
So asking things like, hey, would it be offensive if I followed up in a few months? Or when would be a good time to give you a buzz back? And they tell you, call me in December. I'll probably call them in like October, knowing that we're filming this in like January or maybe September. So, because that way you're ahead of the game. And people are going to forget when they told you. I wouldn't worry too much about that, but you'd rather be the first one in front of them than the last one, right? Because then you're in a competitive situation. And
bingo.
Again, most sellers will hire the first agent that they work with. So just cutting the follow-up time in half for something reasonable. So that can go a long way. High volume calls, right? I mean, how many times have we seen the NAR stat is the average real estate agent follows up 2.7 times, and we know all the conversion happens after 6+ attempts. So just having a lot of communication with these people and building rapport. You coach on the video CMA, Tom, or the CMA a day.
Yep.
That crushes, right? I was late to our call today with Tom because I was wrapping up what looks like it's going to be a sign listing. I've got to get a price onto him and get into the house. It started with a video CMA because he was curious about what was going on in the neighborhood. It took me 8 minutes to record, about 2 minutes to prep. I sent it in a bomb video. And this guy said that, wow, that was really impressive and thorough. Very simple. Like Jimmy Burgess is a big fan of this. So these are it's got to be value-based follow-up, right? And then on these calls, like Tom, you ever get a call where it's like, hey, I'm following up with you. What's going on? And there's like no value-based. They're just looking for like a sale.
It's the worst. It's the worst. Hey, I'm following up.
Horrible,
hey, I'm
right?
checking in.
Yeah. So how about hey, I'm not sure if you saw, Tom, but we've seen supply in the greater Philadelphia area jump up over 27% since this time last year. How would these additional housing options affect your real estate plans? And like all of a sudden, you get the seller that doesn't know where they're going and can't find anything. They're intrigued. You get a buyer who's frustrated. I mean, this applies to everything. You can talk about rates. Just give them some sort of market stats and give them the fact, and then ask a question, and then go into your normal qualifying status. And that's the stuff. And you also got to plan your voicemails, right? Like, what are you going to say on the voicemail? Like, I would actually turn that same question into a voicemail. Give them something of value, and that can become an email, and it can become a text message. You got to give something that's going to get their attention.
Yeah. And I agree with you on stats, something around, hey, we've seen two interesting trends that have occurred since we spoke last. One, there's 27% more properties available for sale, but the more fascinating part is home prices are actually up 4.5%. I'm curious what, and just going into everything else. So that kind of value base, whether that's a voicemail, whether that's a check-in, a script when I'm talking to them on the phone, an email we send, But there's a lot to unpack here. The average person per NAR follows up 2.7 calls. You're saying 6. I would argue it's going to be infinitely more in this environment. The hack around, and it is a pro tip, and it's been around as long as I've been in this industry. Whatever time frame someone tells you, cut it in half. Whatever time frame they tell you, cut it in half, because there's nothing worse than you follow up a little bit later than they originally told you, and that person's already made a decision, met with another agent, listed their house, and they're off to the races, and you're bummed again. So the third one, we talked about proximity. We talked about the Zillow study in terms of long-term nurture. The other one is, how do you simply get in front of them faster? So what have you found to be in your training, in your own work, with your own team, the way just to get in front of more potential sellers?
So this is a great question, because what I found is that when agents think about sellers, they tend to focus on price and commission rates.
Yep.
But that's not the top concern for a lot of sellers. If you look at all the studies that are out there, like Zillow did one, NAR's done one, I'm worried about the timing. I'm worried about prepping my home for the market. There's a variety of concerns under those two groups there, but like timing the sale, making sure everything goes through, and getting the home ready for the market, those are what people are really worried about.
Yeah.
And when you can meet with them there, where you're saying something to the effect of, hey, we've got a home staging team that can help you. So why don't I come take a look? And invariably people talk about, I'm going to do this, 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 and this to my home. Well, why don't we come out and show you what's going to make sense, so you don't over improve the property and lose money, right?
Yes.
Like that'll, and then there's a report out there from Realtor Magazine. It's called the Cost versus Value Report. You can Google this. It'll tell you what the average rate on return is. In the Mid-Atlantic region where we work, rarely do you get 100% return on anything. And some markets is going to be a little different. I don't want to speak to those, but I give them that stats. It's just a way for me to get in the door.
Right.
We met with someone yesterday. They were talking about doing something in Q1, and they want to move. And it's a client of ours that we sold a home to, and the whole thing. And then all of a sudden, well, if we find the right home, we'll move sooner. And you ask a question like, so, hey, Tom, what if you and Kathy see a home that you really like, and it's on the street that you want, and you want to make a move on it, and you feel like you're not ready to make that move, and it sells before you can even get in there? How are you going to feel? And invariably, they're going to say, well, that would suck, right? Like they wouldn't be happy about it.
Right.
Why don't we just do a little prep work? And I don't call it a listing appointment. I call it a strategy meeting or a planning session, because that's what people want.
Right.
So if you can, and think about this, like moving, it's one of the top 5 most stressful things people go through. So if you're looking at it as, hey, my goal is to make it as least stressful as possible. I'm just trying to give you some good information. That way you can make really good decisions moving forward, and we can just be ready just in case the right home comes up. Then they're going to be much more likely to have you over, because you know what you're doing? You're offering to help them. You're not going over trying to get a listing contract signed.
Bingo. It's so interesting. I had this conversation with Tim Smith recently, same exact thing. And having listed a home with him, there really wasn't a presentation. It was, what are you guys trying to accomplish? Where are you going? Let's walk the property. What should we adjust? What should we, he was just value, help the whole time. Now, I'm not saying you don't need a presentation. I'm not saying that every seller is going to be like that, right? Tim is a personal client. He's a friend, right? So we knew what he was going to deliver. But let's, Tom, for sake of argument, we started this by saying 122 listings taken in the first 6 months, 35% all you, the team, involved with the balance of those. That's a lot of listing appointments. You shared a really good insight around the concern that most sellers have, timing, preparing the home for sale. Are there any other insights before we sort of close the door on the list side and go to the buy side that you would want to share with the listener today? Like what else should they be thinking about, whether if it's marketing to get more listing opportunities, or it's, hey, I'm at the appointment and I'm not getting over the finish line. I'm not winning the number of appointments that I want. Shed some light there, if you would, please.
Yeah. I mean, tracking and measuring is going to be big for anybody. So you got to know what your numbers are. I mean, if you're new to getting listings or you haven't taken a lot, I would shoot for at least a 50% sign rate. Like that should be your benchmark. And can you up it from there? My career number's around 72%. Some people are going to say that's low. I would tell you that you're probably not going on enough competitive listing appointments, because you're not going to win them all. Yeah. So, if your sign rate's really high, you could probably challenge yourself a little bit, and it depends on what your goals are. the preparation before the appointment and the pre-appointment process often gets overlooked. So, you worked with Tim. Proximity, by the way. I mean, I don't know if anyone picked up on that. Like, I mean,
Sure.
that's a proximity list right there.
Yep.
But so imagine you're interviewing against a few people, and the first agent, they set the appointment and they just show up at the scheduled time. The second agent, they maybe send a text confirming something really quick. They reach out the same day to make sure it still works. And then the third agent goes and sends a personalized video to you. They send their resume, a link to all their reviews, a preview of what they're going to go over. And all of a sudden, like, who's more likely to get the listing when they show up? Agent 1, agent 2, or agent 3, if all things are equal?
Right.
It's probably going to be the agent that did the extra prep work. I recently took a listing. It was someone that was, I've known for 12, 13 years. Tom, you know the listing. I sent the pre-appointment video, and the first thing was, I love that. I wasn't expecting that. That's awesome. This is someone I've got a strong relationship with. So you want to do that every time. You want to have processes that are repeatable and scalable. So I'd argue the prep is important, pre-qualifying the listing so you know what you're walking into in terms of, like, what are they thinking? What's their time frame? Improvements, that sort of stuff. It's, you just don't want to set an appointment and just show up. You want to kind of know the situation, and then you can ask a lot of questions at the appointment, like Tom talked about. And if you're having trouble getting over the hump, I'd look at, how are you showing up for the appointment? I mean, every market's different. I know in our market, I mean, we were talking earlier, it's like 99, 100 degrees here. It's Nick Lachey weather, right? 98 degrees. I'm wearing a suit and tie every time. Yeah. And I've been during COVID, I was at an appointment. We got assigned. It's 95 degrees outside. I got a mask on top of it. We're in Pennsylvania, and I'm just dripping sweat. I took my jacket off. I kind of loosened up a little bit, but I showed up that way for a reason,
right?
Because that's how important I treat this. It's a job interview. Yes. So you might be, if you're skipping processes or skipping steps, like, I don't need that stat, I don't need to go over this. If someone showed you that's taking a lot of listings, I would just follow what they're doing and just rinse and repeat, and then make it your own as you go, instead of throwing stuff out before you really have a track record.
Yes. Having listed enough houses and worked with so many amazing agents, like, it's incredible the difference between the person that says, oh, let me tell you about the last 5 sales in your community. Did you see this one? Did you see this one? Did you see this one? I had this listing. This person had that listing. This person bought that house. Like, that level of detail makes you just say, well, of course you're my person, right? Of course you're my guy. Of course you're my guy. So again, paying attention to the details. And what I heard a lot of is create degrees of separation. Assume that you're always competing, even if it's your friend, and recognize that someone else may just be showing up haphazardly. They showed up on time, assuming they were getting the listing, but by sending the video, by sending the track record, by sending your reviews, all these little things you could do that just give you, to your point, it's a job interview. I'm trying to give myself the edge. I love that. So let's switch gears. I want to talk about buyer brokerage agreement. You and I, matter of fact, you, myself, Lisa, Byron, this whole crew, we have been working on this since the announcement of NAR losing the lawsuit, all the changes. You and I have been very adamant about, it's a skills market, right? We went from a speed market to a skills market. If you know what to say, you're not having a problem right now. If you don't know what to say, August 17th is right around the corner. You're probably still a little bit nervous. So the things I wrote down that I would be curious about is, from the time that you and I first started working on this, and I have still the original Google Doc of all of our original scripting in front of me, right? Which is now 4 months old. I want to know, approximately what's your sign rate? What are some of the big insights? And maybe we unpack that in the way of, what have you found, you and your team? What works when asking somebody to sign a buyer brokerage agreement? What doesn't work? And then what would maybe be your 2 to 3 recommendations for the person that's listening today? So why don't we just start first with just big insights you've had since you and the team have really taken this on wholeheartedly?
Big insight number one is, you got to know everything about this, but assume the consumer knows nothing.
Yes.
Because if you think about, like, I mean, my cousin's my financial advisor, right? And does a great job, have a lot of trust in him. I don't really ask him a lot of questions. I'm like, hey, tell me what's going on. I trust you. Yeah. Here's what's happening.
Yep.
And that's not that different of a relationship with your real estate agent. It's just a more frequent one, I would argue. So, if you go in, try to over explain things from the beginning, I mean, you can talk yourself out of business, and that's the reality. So I would, know everything, assume the consumer knows nothing, and ask a lot of questions. One of the best questions to ask, and we've role played this to death. Our team's probably sick of hearing of it, but we're going to be ready, and we are ready. Is, hey, what do you understand about the lawsuit when someone brings it up? Don't start verbal vomiting all over them and telling them everything you know. Hey, Tom, so what do you and Kathy understand about the lawsuit? And then hear what they have to say, because what they understand or what their concerns are could be totally different, or it's probably wrong, which is what we've heard a lot of people. And then you've got to have clear answers about, hey, here's the two things that are changing here. And there is a script to this for sure. But instead of assuming they know anything, just, even saying like, hey, I'm really glad you brought that up. That's a big issue right now. So tell me what you understand so far, and then stop talking. That's number one. That's probably the biggest takeaway is you don't want to talk yourself out of business before you even get a chance to earn it. The second major takeaway is that you better know your state documents forwards and backwards, like everything. I'm talking like buyer agency agreements, listing contracts. We've got a certain notice in Pennsylvania we got to sign. It's not the same in other places. What does the agreement of sale say? The changes just came out last week, so we're studying those now so we know how to fill them out. And you want to know exactly, not only know what it says, be able to explain it in the way the consumer can understand.
Right.
Like, you don't want to go to, like, it needs to be broken down. I would argue we have different paragraphs in Pennsylvania. Every paragraph should have a 1 or 2 sentence explanation that's clear and concise. And if you don't know it now, you got a month to practice. So get to work. Those are my 2 major takeaways from this. And then obviously knowing the scripts and knowing how to navigate it, that's a little bit of a different skill set. But good agents already did this stuff, Tom. This isn't anything new.
I know.
We've had buyer brokerage agreements for the couple of decades plus I've been doing this. And there's some people that just rely on .loop or DocuSign to do all the work for them. You've got to explain this stuff now and make sure everyone's really clear.
Yeah. I go back to Ken Pozak and Lisa Chinati, who in the month of April this year, one had 108 buyer brokerage agreements signed, one had 62. Most of them had, if the fee in their marketplace was here, like the average buy side fee, they were getting them signed up here, right? They were getting exclusive agreements. They were getting, 30-day agreements, short-term, long-term, exclusive, not exclusive, the whole 9 yards. And interviewing both of them, they basically said the same thing. Answer all the questions, but don't overshare, because you'll put X's on the client's eyes and you actually make them nervous. So it's this balance between transparency, making sure that they understand what they're getting into, what they're paying for, how all that stuff's working. But to your point, don't verbally vomit on them, because those are the ones that go, well, I think I need to get more information on this. So it's that balance, right? Between answering all their questions, making sure they're clear on the agreements, making sure you're clear. I literally just had this conversation with, shout out to Leo Perea, the CEO of eXp, who's a friend. We spent a couple hours yesterday and we're just talking about every state has different agreements, and you've got to understand every single one of them for him at his level. So I love that. What have you found beyond that, like beyond sort of those 2 big insights? What doesn't work from a consumer standpoint?
What doesn't work is, sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No.
What doesn't work is defending.
Yeah.
Education works, right? Like it's, look, you've got to, like in Pennsylvania, they rolled out something in the buyer agency agreement that says a non-refundable retainer fee, right? So this is what Pennsylvania's coming out with. We'll see how this goes. I just saw this a couple days ago, but the point is, you don't defend it, you just educate around it. And hey, personally, like I don't charge that, but that's here because some people do. That's not a defense. That's just what's going on. So there's a way to do this with really educating people, because everyone's entitled to a professional fee, and most people are okay paying a fee if they're getting what they bargained for.
Right.
Now, it's, part of the reason this lawsuit I think exists is because of lazy agents who just kind of showed up and didn't do a whole lot and made the transaction harder. So one of my first takeaways is, if you got a buyer that's been jerking you around and not being loyal, if you've got a client that you think they're cheating on you, Tom, I don't know if you ever saw, like they're working with multiple agents. This is going to flush all that stuff out.
Right.
And it's your opportunity, if you can explain it right, to either win them over or get that time waster out of your schedule and find someone who actually wants to work with you and believes in what you're doing. Because that's what great agents have done way before this lawsuit.
100%. 100%. So what would your 3 recommendations be?
So I would get a script down. I mean, and I'm a big believer that, and we did some, I think, I don't know, Ryan Town and Lisa, and they were doing some work around like scripting and AI analysis. And one of the biggest turnoffs was talking about buyer agency on the first call. It's set the appointment and then have a confirmation call, which we just talked about this, and then go over everything that you need to go over. And I would have a script around that and offer options to people. Don't just say you got to do this, because people don't like that.
No.
We've come up with a script where it's pretty simple. We've taken all the real estate jargon out of it. I can share it here if you like.
Please.
And so I'll give it to you in a second. And you take all the real estate jargon out of it, and then you just offer options to people, which is what most clients want anyway. So, Tom, let's assume we got a call, or we got an appointment to look at a home tomorrow at 5 o'clock, and then we'll take it from there. So, ring, ring, ring.
Hello.
Tom, hi. It's Tom Toole here with RE/MAX Main Line. Just calling to confirm our appointment for tomorrow at 5 o'clock over at 123 Banana Street. Wanted to make sure that still worked for you and Kathy.
Absolutely, yes. We can't wait to see the house.
Yeah, looks like a nice place. I'm excited to show it to you as well. And I took the liberty of lining up a couple more that are similar to it, so we can kind of go over that when we get there. And if you don't like them, we don't have to go see them. But I wanted to show you all your options. And I was just curious, Tom, has anyone taken the time to explain to you the changes that are taking place to touring homes and working with a buyer's agent like myself?
No, but I mean, I've certainly read about some of the commission things that are changing, but just sort of high level. So no, what do I need to know?
Sure. Yeah. And I'm glad you told me you have a little understanding of it. That really helps. So the major change is that as of August 17th, buyers and agents are now required to enter into a buyer agreement before touring any properties. Really? Normally we would do this when we were, and it's obviously a big change for the industry as well. Normally we would do this when we're writing an offer or when we're moving ahead. So the timing's changed a little bit. So normally what we'll do is, obviously I'll meet with you and Kathy, go over everything. And normally we offer a 6 or a 12-month contract, and most people go with the shorter one and wanted to see what term would work best for you.
So 6 or 12 months, those are the two options?
So it sounds like a lot. And that's what we normally offer. Mm-hmm. And because of this new environment, we've come up with a third option for folks because we haven't even met yet. And I want to make sure you feel comfortable. I feel comfortable.
Sure.
Kathy feels comfortable. So we've got an option for like a property specific contract. Now, if you want to do that every time we go look at something, we'll have to sign a new agreement, or we could do like a 30-day test drive. I don't know if you ever test drove a car before, but you kind of see how it works, make sure everything feels comfortable, and then you can move ahead with a longer term commitment. Is that something you'd be open-minded to?
Yeah, I mean, I want to have a conversation with my wife about it, but I think kind of maybe the 30-day test drive probably is at least the right move kind of out of the gate.
Yeah, and I mean, I want to earn your business, Tom. I want to be really clear. And if we want to go see some other properties, it becomes pretty cumbersome to go look at these things and keep re-signing agreements. So, best case, we help you find a great new home. Worst case, if you don't like me or don't think I'm the right person for the job, we can go our separate ways, and that's totally cool. Again, we're here to earn your business. And I'm married too, so definitely talk with your wife. I totally get that.
Love it. Okay, I think if the person listening right now just goes rewind, listen, on my finger, YouTube, however you're listening to this, like over and over and over again, that was beautiful. And that's not that far off from what you and I were playing around with 3-4 months ago. Right?
The test drive language,
that was
I think, and this isn't me, right? So this is from our killer sales manager, Brian Black. That's the kind of leadership we bring in, because he comes from the auto body business, and everyone knows what a test drive is, right?
Right.
But when you say, I was saying like a 30-day test.
Yeah.
That sounds like you got like a medical problem or something. You're going into like the lab, right? Yeah. So it's these little subtleties go a long way, but that's why you got to practice this stuff before August 17th.
Yes.
You can't wait until then. And now we have our agents doing this by memory. It's sounding really natural.
Right.
And they're getting these contracts signed. And the 30-day test is, look, I mean, the other side of this here, the reality is I haven't met you yet, Tom, and I have to sign a contract with you for 6 months. I think a lot of people might feel uncomfortable with that. So you want to future pace them. Hey, we're going to move ahead and kind of, we'll start with a date, and then we can maybe go ahead and formalize things down the line. That it's a great option, and it's going to win a lot of trust, and the people are going to respect you for it.
I agree. I love that one. I also love, shout out to Ken Pozak, who did 108 signed, and they did it all with buyers that their agents were already working with. So we're already working with them. And the campaign the goal was, can we get a whole bunch of them to sign agreements? And they did a remarkable job. And the script essentially was, hey, Tom, has anybody taken the time to share with you? I know we've been out looking at properties. Has anybody taken the time? Have you heard more about this? Again, just kind of get them familiar with it. And then it was, hey, Tom, when we originally sat down, you and I and Bridget, have I fulfilled on all the things I said I was going to do in our initial consultation? Yeah, no, you've been great. Wonderful. Well, because of the new ruling starting October, or August 17th, the next natural step for us is to enter into that agreement early so we can take care of you and la, la, la. And that was it. He was like, we kept it super simple. 108 people signed with existing customers. That's the key. Existing customers we're already showing houses to. So just want to give the listener another perspective. I got time for one more recommendation, then we got to bounce, get you back to work and get me back into my next show. What's one other recommendation you have beyond that perfect script?
So the script's good. You got to treat these like you treat listings. I think that's I've had this epiphany this year, and we've talked about this, is that the more you treat things like listings in the conversion cycle, the better off you're going to be. Because if you're asking someone to sign an agreement, that's the goal of a listing, right? Yep. The mindset around buyers used to be, I hope they like me and let me continue to show them homes until they find something they want.
Yep.
Well, that's not the case anymore. And this is going to be a huge opportunity for anybody that feels like they've been getting beaten up by buyers, because it's going to force the issue. It's going to force you to get better in a lot of ways. So send the pre-appointment video that we just talked about.
Bingo.
Show up ready for an interview. Have them come to the office before you go show them homes. This is something I was taught in 2001 or whenever I started selling real estate. And you had to, because one, they didn't have electronic signatures. Two, people looked at the MLS book and all this other stuff. It was very archaic.
Yeah.
And they would expect you to drive them around. So it was why don't we meet first before we do anything? We can go over things in that regard. So I'm just looking at this as buyer business became listing business. Elevate your interview game and your skill set. Get in front of them sooner, right? Hey, we're thinking about moving in 6 months' time. Well, great. Why don't we meet now and have a planning meeting and just kind of get comfortable around things?
Yeah.
It's no different. And the good news here is that you're going to have clients that aren't going to be cheating on you, or you're not going to get that call, oh, we bought with somebody else, or any of that nonsense. And it's okay to be a great buyer's agent. You just got to commit to the skill sets the same way a lot of people commit to listings.
I love it. I love it. That's a mic drop finish, Tom. I appreciate you always. We got to bounce to stay on track today. For my friend out there listening, I don't know, are you taking notes? Are you paying attention? You should absolutely follow Tom Toole on Instagram. He's got a radio show, all kinds of ways that you can connect with this rock star. He's giggling here. But Tommy, as always, I appreciate you. I will see you next week on our next session. And for my friend listening, share this with a friend or two that might need to see this or hear this. And thank you for being a part of my community and listening to our content. We'll see you on the next show.